Coronation Street spoilers. Amy drugs and kidnaps creepy date rapist Dan as she spirals. Amy Barlow has made it her mission to protect other women from predatory men, but recent Coronation Street scenes have seen her take things too far. After deciding to go home and work on her essay for her degree, Amy bumped into Dylan Wilson, who was walking around without his trainers on. When Amy suggested he fight back against the person who took them, Dylan refused, stating that some people were always going to be victims. This sparked something in Amy, and, deciding that she didn't want to be a victim, she headed off to the club. Almost as soon as she'd arrived, she spotted Dan spiking a drink, which he then handed over to a drunk woman. Determined to intervene, Amy knocked the drink out of the woman's hand, before dragging her to the toilets to dry off. While they were there, Amy informed her of what she had seen Dan doing, though the woman didn't believe her at first. After Amy confided in her about her rape ordeal, the woman was grateful that she had stepped in, and soon headed home. But warning the woman off wasn't enough for Amy, who was still determined to get her own back. As soon as she had gone, Amy introduced herself to Dan and set her plan into motion. It wasn't long before Dan headed to the bar to buy some drinks, and spiked Amy's in the process. However, Amy had her wits about her, and was sure to swap the glasses round when Dan wasn't looking. Soon, Dan was drinking out of the spiked glass, and it didn't take long for the drugs to take their toll. With Dan stumbling around the club, Amy called for help from Ardy Allahan, who soon arrived to pick him up. However, when Ardy got lost trying to find Dan's house, they ended up on an industrial estate, where Amy put the next part of her plan into action. Dragging Dan out of the car, she revealed to Ardy that he had been drugging women and deserved to face the consequences. As Amy tied Dan up and prepared to leave him on the side of the road, Ardy tried to get through to her about what a terrible idea this was, pointing out that she was clearly having a breakdown. Thankfully, Amy was soon convinced to take Dan to the hospital, where they discovered that he had overdosed. Together, they came up with a story that Dan had spiked Amy's drink and picked up the wrong one, so they had brought him to hospital as soon as they realized. When D.S. Swain came to question him, this was the story Ardy told, though suspicious D.S. Swain clearly didn't believe it. When Amy insisted that Dan was a rapist and should be arrested immediately, D.S. Swain reminded her that she had no evidence of this, unless there was something she wasn't telling her. Pointing out that Amy had been at the center of a crime twice in as many days, she told the pair that they needed to hope that Dan could corroborate their story when he woke up. Will Dan drop them in it when he comes round? And what could this mean for them both?
Xin chào các bạn đã quay trở lại với kênh Spoiler. Vừa rồi các bạn đã theo dõi một